Imagine a cruel king whose kingdom stretched across continents. His armies were important, but his daughters' smarts were even more important. This video tells the story of Genghis Khan's daughters, who helped build and protect one of the biggest empires in history. But how did these women, whose famous father often stole the show, have so much power in a world ruled by men? We have a surprise for you about how they helped make Genghis Khan the Beast of the East. Genghis Khan, also known as the Beast of the East, was one of the cruelest and strongest rulers in history. His Mongol Empire grew across Asia and Europe in the 1300s. People often praise his military skill and the sheer power of the Mongol army as reasons for his success. But his daughters are also an important part of his power that is often ignored. These strong women were very important in building and keeping the empire's huge lands, making sure that Genghis Khan's legacy lived on long after he died. Genghis Khan's rise to power. It's important to know what led to Genghis Khan's rise before getting into the parts his daughters played. Genghis Khan was born as Temujin in 1162. He had a rough childhood full of betrayal and poverty, but he led the Mongol tribes to unity. He built an enormous kingdom that spanned from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea by being a great military leader, making smart alliances, and having an unmatched ability to make people loyal. Genghis Khan built one of the biggest countries that connected to each other in history. He died in 1227. Genghis Khan's military victories were very cruel. His armies destroyed whole cities and tribes, sometimes only leaving behind people who had something valuable to give the Mongols. His kingdom wasn't just based on military power, though. Genghis Khan was a brilliant leader who changed the way Mongols lived, set up a system for choosing leaders based on merit, and encouraged trade and communication across his huge kingdom. Not only did he make changes to the military and the government, but also to his family, especially his ties with his daughters, which had a big impact on his empire. The daughters of Genghis Khan, power behind the throne that can't be seen. Genghis Khan had many girls, and all of them were born to his first wife, Börte. Some of these girls who stood out were Alaqai Beki, Alaqai, Checheyigen, and Tumlin. Unlike many patriarchal societies at the time, where daughters were often ignored or married off for political reasons, Genghis Khan saw his daughters' promise and gave them important military and political duties. This was a smart move on his part, since his daughters were very important in keeping the peace in the lands he had just taken over and winning over the regional leaders' allegiance. Strategic marriages, making the Mongol Empire bigger. One way Genghis Khan used his girls was by setting them up in marriage on purpose. He didn't send them to foreign courts where they wouldn't have much power. Instead, he married them off to strong leaders in the Mongol Empire and in new lands that it had taken over. That being said, these marriages were more than just partnerships. A lot of the time, the girls kept a lot of power over the areas they married into, and they often became real rulers in their own right. One example is Alaqai Beki, who was married to a well-known leader of the Onggud group, which ruled over important parts of northern China. Alaqai Beki was the wife of a clan leader, so she had a lot of power and was in charge of running the area for her father. Genghis Khan did the same thing with his other daughters, who were put in charge of border areas. This way, he could expand his power without having to keep an eye on them all the time. Genghis Khan was able to keep the people in these areas loyal and stable, which made this plan very smart. By giving his daughters places of power, he made sure that the newly taken over lands would stay with the Mongol Empire. His daughters were devoted to their father and the Mongol cause, so they worked to bring these areas into the kingdom, while keeping things stable so that it could grow even more. Daughters as rulers, running the country with wisdom and strength. Genghis Khan's daughters had a lot more to do than just being formal leaders or being added on to their husbands. They were strong and wise leaders who ran their areas as rulers, managers, and military leaders. The men in their lives often held titles of power, but it was the girls who ran the day-to-day government, kept order, and carried out Mongol rules. With this two-tier system, Genghis Khan could keep control of his empire in one place while giving important tasks to his children. For example, Alaqai Beki was a smart and skilled leader who not only ran the Onggud tribe, but also made sure the empire's northern borders were safe. Her work to keep things calm in this area was very important to the Mongols' general success in their invasion of China. In the same way, her sisters ruled their own lands with skill and tact, putting down rebellions and controlling the powerful people in each area. One of the most amazing things about Genghis Khan's children was that they could stay in charge even after their husbands died. Many times, when the daughters' husbands died, they kept their power and continued to rule as regents or sovereigns on their own. This was very different from what women usually did when their husbands died in the Middle Ages, when they often lost their standing and power. What women do in Mongol society. Genghis Khan's daughters had important roles, but this wasn't completely new in Mongol society. Compared to other cultures today, women in Mongol society often had better status and more freedom. Mongol women ran the homes, took care of the animals, and even watched over their camps while the men were away on war campaigns. The idea that women should be strong and independent carried over into politics when Genghis Khan gave his daughters a lot of power. Even though there were still male-centered systems in Mongol society, women were seen as very important to the tribes working. Genghis Khan's dependence on his daughters wasn't an outlier. It was part of how the Mongols generally thought about gender roles. Genghis Khan's ability to recognize and empower his children in this way shows how practical and forward-thinking he was as a leader. Genghis Khan's daughters were very smart when it came to politics. In addition to running the empire, Genghis Khan's daughters were also very good at negotiating and diplomacy, which was very important for keeping the balance of power in the Mongol Empire. As Genghis Khan's empire grew, it included many different faiths, languages, and cultures. To rule such a large and varied kingdom, you needed both strong armies and the political skills to understand how things worked in different countries. The daughters were go-betweens between their father's court and the areas they were in charge of. They shared information, made deals, and made sure that the local elites stayed true to the Mongol cause. They were smart about politics and used it to bring newly conquered peoples into the kingdom. This made places more stable that might have fought Mongol rule otherwise. She married a powerful Oirat leader, which is one of the best examples of this kind of political skill. The Oirats were a group of people that lived in what is now Mongolia and parts of Russia. It was very hard to bring them into the Mongol Empire. Through her marriage, Checheyigen was able to bring the Oirats closer to her father's kingdom, which made it easier for them to join the Mongols. Daughters in the crisis over the Mongol throne. Genghis Khan's girls were still involved after he died in 1227. After he died, the kingdom had to deal with the tough issue of who would take over. Genghis Khan had many sons. His third son, Mokidi, was officially heir apparent, but there was a fierce power battle among his children and grandchildren. During this time, his children continued to be very important to keeping the empire stable. Genghis Khan had daughters, and one of them, Al-Altan, sided with her brother Ogidi and worked to make him the Great Khan. Her political power helped keep the family from fighting with each other and kept the transfer of power stable. This help was very important for keeping the kingdom together during a time when it might have broken up. In the same way, other daughters used their power in their regions to back different throne candidates. They were very important to the Mongol Empire's complicated internal politics because they sided with different groups. This made sure that Genghis Khan's influence would live on even though there were fierce family rivalries. Genghis Khan's daughters left behind a legacy that is often forgotten. Genghis Khan's daughters have made important contributions, but their brothers and the male generals who served the kingdom have often been given more attention. Most historical accounts of the Mongol Empire that were written by men have focused on Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons' military successes, rarely looking at the part of his daughters. But new research is starting to look at the role of women in the Mongol Empire again. And it's becoming clear how important Genghis Khan's daughters were in building and keeping the empire together. They were not just bystanders, they were active leaders in politics, the military, and diplomacy, with a lot of power and impact. Genghis Khan's daughters built an empire without being recognized for it. Genghis Khan's daughters were more than just political pawns. They helped build and stabilize the Mongol Empire, and made sure it would last through smart leadership, negotiation, and management. They married for strategic reasons, which grew the kingdom, and their administrative skills kept large areas stable. Genghis Khan is known as the Beast of the East, but it was his daughters who helped him build and protect his kingdom, making sure that his name would live on for generations. The story of Genghis Khan's daughters shows how important women were in creating history, which is something that is often forgotten. As the Mongol Empire grew, it became. The guidance and loyalty of these amazing women made Genghis Khan's army one of the strongest in history. Even though they have been forgotten for a long time, their achievements are slowly being remembered. They were very important to the rise of the Mongol Empire. If you enjoy them covering the hidden stories behind history's greatest empires, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Join us for more fascinating insights into the people and events that shaped the world.